Get out the insurance cards, get out the copays. The office is open, my friends. Brought to you by drroto.com.
Hey there, everybody, it's Dr. Roto. Get out the insurance cards, get out the copay. The office is open, my friends. It is time for the Caught Looking MLB podcast with my good friend and director of baseball content over at Dr. Roto, Lou Landers, who, by the way, did I see Lou Landers as #1 overall in the Great Fantasy Baseball Invitational? I think that caught my eye earlier this week, Lou.
Yeah, it caught my eye too. And I know it's early, but I had to take a screenshot of it. So at least I can say that at one point during the season, I was doing well.
Well, I think you may remember I was in first until like late August last year. And then the last 2 weeks, people I didn't even know existed, they just kind of like came out of the woodwork. It is not easy. There's 500 experts in that. So to be first at any point in the season is a great start. So I'm very, very happy for you.
Well, I appreciate it. And at the very least, I'd love to stay on top of my league. That would be a nice finish to me. I don't expect to be at the top of the overall, but to try and win the league would also be a nice goal.
Is it horrible to say that I need to be at the top of the whole thing, Lou? Like if I win my division, it doesn't faze me. I know that sounds horrible to say, but if I'm not first, it wasn't a good league for me.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect anything different from you. You hold yourself to the highest of standards. So
I do. If I don't win, I'm pissed. All right, let's talk about winning this year. There's some guys who are playing out of their minds. So let's start with Marcell Ozuna. Marcell Ozuna was probably going in like the mid-rounds here, Lou. Dude's hitting the ball like you wouldn't believe. Acuna, he's got more home runs than Acuna. He's got more home runs than most of Atlanta's lineup. He's got more RBIs than the A's whole team. Are you buying into him or are you trading him now?
I mean, I definitely have bought into him. And the only reason why he went where he goes, Doc, is because most sites have him as utility only. And people always worry about that because they like to be able to use that spot for other people. But this guy is an elite producer at the plate in 4 categories. He was last year, too, in the Great Braves lineup. I mean, at this point, if I can get something really good for him, would I potentially sell high? Yes, because he's not going to end up with 160 or 170 RBIs and 55 home runs or anything like that. But no, he's going to be solid. He's going to be good all year.
Before the draft, the most controversial player by far was Elly De La Cruz. People were like, I'm not taking this guy. He's not going in the second round. If I was the 4th round, I wouldn't take him. Well, he looks pretty good to me. If we had a draft right now, what round are you taking Elly De La Cruz in?
I'm going to take him right where I took him in TGFBI, which is one of the reasons why I am doing so well. I took him with my 2nd round pick, and I believe I drafted 11th overall, 10th or 11th overall. So I guess in the top 20 or so, give or take.
It was a bold move. And I remember you and I talking about it, and we were saying, look, these types of leagues, you got to go for it. You can't play it safe. You play it safe, you lose, right? You take your chance. Who was your first pick? Was it Juan Soto?
It was.
Right. So Soto and Elly De La Cruz, with shock. Why is Lou Landers winning that type of league? You've got to be able to take risks like that. I'm shocked that Soto made it to 11. Honestly, I took him at 9. I mean, look, the dude's playing for a contract. He's playing in the perfect stadium for him. I mean, are the Yankees going to pay him the way they should?
They're certainly going to try, but I have a feeling he's going to test free agency regardless, based on who his agent is and all that. I think if the Yankees offered him like a 13 or 14 year deal worth like 45, 50 million a year in season as an extension, he'd still probably go to free agency.
All right, let me talk about some other players here, maybe some good and some bad. Xander Bogaerts can't seem to buy a hit. Like if he bought a hit, he didn't pay enough for it. He'd have to go and pay more. But you drafted him probably in round 4, 5, or 6. Do you cut him? Do you trade him? Or are you just stuck with him?
You are stuck with him and you wait for things to balance out because it's still so early. It's not even the end of April yet. If he's still batting close to 200 come middle to end of May, I'd start to worry. But at this point, he's a 7 for 10 type of situation away from all of a sudden looking like he's having a great year.
It's so funny you said that because people panic. Julio Rodriguez looks awful, right? But it's April. He never hits well in April. This isn't a shock. And then what you said was true. If all of a sudden Xander or Julio gets into a 2-week hot streak, now all of a sudden, because it's so early in the year with all the at-bats, they could be jumping up incrementally. When is it too soon to panic? Nick Castellanos, James Outman. When do we panic on guys?
I always want to see at least 150 at-bats, I want to say, before I'm really panicked. Now, it depends, of course. Guys like that, 150 at-bats. Rookies, for instance, if they're not getting it done within the first, I want to say, 50 at-bats, like Victor Scott, for instance, it's probably time to cut bait.
I always feel like if I cut bait on Victor Scott, he goes to the minors and starts hitting 350 again. They bring him back up. And when he comes back up, he sticks. It's hard to stick as a minor leaguer, right? You just can't find your footing. But when you find your footing, you're good, right? And I don't want to miss that. And I always feel like I end up holding these guys longer than I want to because I'm afraid to miss out. I got FOMO, Lou.
And that's a really good point and a fair point. And I think in the past, I've definitely been guilty of holding guys for too long. And it simply depends on the player, on their situation, and what your team is doing. Like for me, I'm holding David Robertson as long as I can, because although he's not getting saves, and now it's Yates, who we'll talk about at some point, Yates has had injury history. If I cut Robertson, all of a sudden Yates gets injured or Yates blows a save and then Robertson gets a save, he's going for 150 FAAB on Sunday when I had him on my roster the week before. So I'm going to hold that guy like that as long as possible. That's just one example, but that's the way you have to look at it.
But I think that's a really good point. So let's talk about Yuki Matsui, who I know we both liked. The dude's coming in the 5th inning, right? Abner Uribe came in the 4th inning earlier this week. Panic button is happening in my brain. But I know that Suarez gets injured. Now Matsui's pitching in the 9th inning. But I may need a spot for a guy who I think could help me. At what point do you hold? At what point do you go for that guy? It's a very precarious situation, Lou.
It definitely is, and I'll repeat it. Basically, it all depends on who the guy you're looking to get is, what they can do for your team, and how badly you need it. There's some potential steals guys available this weekend. And if you're hurting for steals or you think you're middle of the pack and want to get up higher in the steals department, you might want to drop or cut a Matsui type, a fringe closer type to get that speed.
All right, you mentioned steals guys. I know that James Young is one of those guys from Washington. Jacob Young, excuse me. He's a pretty fast guy. Who are some of the other steals guys that you're looking at besides Young?
Clase, Jonathan Clase of the Seattle Mariners is a guy I definitely am looking at. Remember, we thought what Victor Scott was going to be. Clase is elite speed too, 79 stolen bases last year in the minors. And that's a lot of stolen bases. So if he can produce while Canzone is out, that's certainly going to give him a chance to stick with the Mariners. And yeah, you mentioned Jacob Young. This guy has 6 stolen bases in 12 games this year. He had 13 stolen bases in 33 games last year. So clearly the guy can run, and he's getting a chance to play. At some point, you got to think James Wood is going to be up with the Nationals, and Young's not going to be in the lineup very much anymore unless there's injuries. But while he's playing, he's going to steal bases. So scoop him up, put him in your lineup as long as he's playing, rack up the stolen bases, and when he loses his regular playing time, you cut him for somebody else. All
right, let's talk about some of these big guys. You mentioned them. James Wood should be up yesterday. I don't know what this guy needs to do. He's hitting 345. He's fantastic. When do they bring him up?
It's got to be by the middle of May at the latest. I can't see why they wouldn't. And they're playing better than you would have expected too, right? Not that you think, okay, this team's going to be able to beat the Phillies or the Braves in this division. But the Marlins made a wild card spot last year with 84 wins. Who's to say the Nationals can't surprise people and win 83 to 85 games and maybe squeeze in as the last team in the NL? Why wait to bring up possibly your most talented player outside of CJ Abrams when you have him just sitting there waiting?
All right, so let me ask you this question. I'm going to tell you what I did in Tout Wars, and it was a very bold move. I don't recommend it for everybody. In Tout, if you pick up a guy off the minors, you can stash him for a week, but he has to be in your starting lineup. So I went to Baltimore, and I said Mayo and Hurstad, stuck him on my reserve, had him active for a week. I got 0 stats, but I know these guys are coming up at some point. What do you do if your league allows you to do that? And there's Caminero, right, from Tampa, and there's James Wood, and there's Skeens from Pittsburgh. Are you willing to take 0 stats to roster these guys now?
I would do that at this point in the season, yes. I don't think the 0 is going to hurt you as much right now. Things can be made up. I wouldn't want a 0 in July, August, or September, but I would be okay with a 0 now for guys like that who you know are huge impact players if and when they get the call. I mean, Skeens could be an immediate ace. I'm not saying he's going to be like a Spencer Strider, but he has that potential to come up and light up the radar gun and rack up those strikeouts the way Strider did a couple of years ago.
All right, now you said something interesting with Skeens, and I'm going to throw it out there. The last time he pitched, he threw 65 pitches. We saw what they've been doing with Jared Jones, who was phenomenal the other day, and at the end of 5 innings, they pulled him. So let's say Skeens comes up in FAAB. Let's just say he comes up today. Who knew, right? People are going to bid $800 on this guy, but it may not make sense if he's only pitching 60 pitches in 5 innings. He may not even get any wins. Now, I'm not saying he won't get 8 strikeouts or 9 strikeouts, but are we overpaying for what we're actually getting?
Well, I think you could get a sub-3 ERA, a good whip, and a crazy like 11 or 12 K per 9. So that's going to deliver you the fantasy goods regardless of the wins. And 5 innings is enough for the win. If he's only pitching 3 or 4, that could be a problem. At the same time, maybe they do something clever with an opener. They give him an opener and then let him pitch the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. You just don't know what managers are going to do at this point. And I also think that maybe with Skeens, they don't want to waste too many bullets of his in the minor leagues, if that makes sense. So they are being more careful. Perhaps if and when they call him to the majors, they let him go 80 to 85 pitches more than the 60 to 65.
It totally makes sense. Now, I look at the Mets who have Christian Scott, right? The guy's in AAA. He's 24 years old. It's not like he's 21 like Skeens. Scott is firing at all cylinders. Why are the Mets not bringing this guy up? I mean, what does he need to be, 42 before they bring him up?
Yeah, organizations do super strange things sometimes, Doc. And I also think that some of this has to do with the fact that, and they bring these guys up, if they can qualify or be in the top 3 of Rookie of the Year voting, they get extra picks and they get a benefit with the service time. In the National League right now, I'm not sure you're going to get that. You already have Yamamoto and Churio who look like they're going to be the main candidates, right, to be the Rookie of the Year, maybe even Jared Jones. So if you're the Mets, you don't have as much incentive right now to do something like that. I think the Rays are in the same situation with Caminero because of some of the other rookies around the league, like a guy like Wyatt Langford, for instance, who isn't even playing that great yet, but there's a good chance that guy is the heavy favorite to win that award.
Yeah, but Wyatt Langford has to get a hit first, Lou.
Oh, well, he's been hitting, getting on base. There's just no power yet.
Yeah, it's a little weird because I think it's like when he finally gets it, it's going to come in droves. You know what I mean? Like the power, it's just going to come. So let me ask you this question here. You said, why do the teams want to bring him up? The Mets are just, I don't know, kind of a joke in many ways. You bring in Julio Teheran. Seriously, the guy's bad. He was bad 5 years ago, and now you're bringing him in. You got Christian Scott there. You got a billionaire owner. You got a bunch of pissed off fans. Isn't that reason enough to bring a guy up?
You would think so. You would definitely think so. And it's sometimes hard to understand what these organizations are doing. And I always want to say we know best because we look at it and we make logical points, and the points we're making are logical. But these people within these organizations, the higher ups, get paid a lot of money to make these decisions. So there must be some reason. Just because they're not sharing that reason necessarily doesn't mean they don't have a good one. But you're right. Although Buto looked good so far. Quintana's okay. Severino has looked good. But Adrian Hauser, not a huge fan. You mentioned Teheran. Sean Manaea, okay. But it's not like they have this great rotation right now.
Are you telling me that Scott doesn't come up and is not one of the top 2 in that rotation immediately?
Certainly could be the third best.
Right. I would argue even higher. All right. Let me ask you about, I don't know if I'm saying his name right because he's from Cuba. Is it Andy Pages? You tell me how to
believe it's I believe it's Pages.
Pages. He could be really good, right? He's had some good numbers in AA, maybe not so huge in AAA. But this year was pretty big. He was hitting 371 with 5 home runs and 62 at bats. He's now hitting for the Dodgers. Am I opening up the coffers and paying for him this week in FAAB?
I'm not going crazy. I'm not going to drop 100 plus like somebody might, but I'm definitely looking in the 60 to 80 range, depending on where you're at with how much you've spent. If you've only spent 100 or less, I think you can afford to spend 80 or so on a guy like this. If you've already dropped 200, 300, there's going to be other guys that come up. Is he good? Yes. The reason I like him the most simply is because he would be with the Dodgers, though.
All right, here's my issue with a lot of my teams. My pitching is great. My pitching's been phenomenal, though. My hitting hasn't been nearly as good. I've got a lot of guys on crappy teams, which has been bothersome, and I'm not getting the power. I'm not getting the home runs. So I feel like I need to go and find somebody in FAAB who might be able to, give my team that boost. Is there anybody out there? Is there any hitter? Now, I know the Woods and the Camaneros, but I got to wait for those guys. That could be 3-4 weeks. I need a guy today.
I got a cheap one for you, too, I think. Ryan O'Hearn, Baltimore Orioles. He has been excellent for the Orioles, even dating back to last season. He has hit right-handed pitching really well. And this guy's been hitting in the cleanup spot, Doc. The cleanup spot with all the big names they have in Baltimore now. And Ryan O'Hearn is batting in the cleanup spot. It makes him very intriguing. And he's got power, too. So if you're looking for a little jolt and you also don't want to spend the 100 to 150s plus on these young prospects who aren't proven the way O'Hearn has. He's had some pretty decent MLB seasons. So that's a guy I think might fit the bill for you.
All right. I like him. I always have. However, I just named you 2 dudes who are in the minor leagues who can really rake, Kjerstad and Mayo. If there's any spot in this Baltimore lineup where they could go, would it be at first base with Mountcastle? Would it be at DH with O'Hearn? I mean, where Mayo? I mean, you're not taking out Gunnar Henderson. You're not taking out Mullins. You're not taking out Jackson Holliday. You're not taking out Jordan Westberg, who's been good. Where are these other guys going to go?
Yeah, at some point, that would be a tough pill to swallow for a guy like O'Hearn. He'd probably be a candidate to lose a bunch of playing time when those guys, if and when those guys come up. That's probably a given. One thing we did talk about 2 or 3 weeks ago on the podcast was I do think, although you don't want to trade those guys, I do think at some point Baltimore might move one of them because there's so many guys for only so many spots, and they do have potential weaknesses in the starting rotation, even though Means could be coming back, Bradish is coming back. But I'm thinking long-term for this team too. And we've talked about Corbin Burns only being on 1-year deal. If you can go out and use some of these high-end prospects to get a really good controllable arm, I think it's something Baltimore really needs to consider. So we might not see those guys. They might come up and hit in the big leagues, but it might not be for the Baltimore Orioles.
Right. Look, as long as they come up, I think they're going to hit wherever they go. All right, my man. I have had a weird DFS season. It's been like this. The first day, literally the opening day, I came in third in some big contest on FanDuel. You know, some nights I'm winning on DraftKings. I love my stacks until they play. You know, I'll have my Dodgers stack in there, and then they'll go 0 for 12 for all three of them. Like, what's going on? Why is fantasy baseball? Why is DFS baseball honestly the most frustrating sport? Now I say NBA is frustrating because guys come in and out, but baseball, I'm loving. I've got the Freeman, Ohtani, Muncy, Will Smith stack 0 for 16.
Yeah, it is very frustrating. And I think it's because they play so many games. And you can look at what guys do on an average basis. You can look at the matchups, but anything is super possible. I mean, we have guys who randomly will throw a no-hitter that you've barely ever heard of. And you can have the best pitcher in baseball get blasted in 3 innings. You can have guys have 2 or 3 home run nights and then hit 1 for the rest of the year. So that's just the way it is. That's baseball, is what they would say. As John Sterling would say, that's baseball, Susan. And he just retired after a very, very good career. But he's right. That's baseball. And that's baseball, Doc. I'm going to start telling you that every week now. You can think you have the right play, and you could go with the Dodgers and they can get shut out by Jake Irvin for some reason on Wednesday. And tonight the Dodgers could put up 13 runs. You know, that's just the way it is.
Isn't it interesting with the Yankees to go from like Phil Rizzuto and Bill White, and then all of a sudden you get a John Sterling? I mean, you've got like the Hall of Fame broadcasters galore in that organization.
Yeah, well, it's good that they're doing something right, because based on team building, it hasn't been good for about 15, 16 years now.
All right, let's talk about Seattle's in Colorado. However, there is a 70% chance of rain, and it is a balmy 38 degrees there tonight, Lou. Will you be? And now there used to be a thing about Friday nights in Colorado is not the night to play that game. Are you in on this game? Are you out on this game? Or are we fading it?
I am definitely in on it. I mean, you have to watch for the weather, though, Doc. That's going to be the biggest thing.
I know. I said 70% chance of rain. It's going to be 38 degrees.
Yeah, so you have to see. I'm not worried. If the game plays, I'm in. But if they postpone it, that's a problem for me. That's where I would be very concerned, because if you make those lineups and then they postpone it, obviously you're in trouble. But I do have a different stack you could go to if you wanted to go a different way, and that is the Brewers against Kyle Gibson, who's just dreadful.
All right. Are you stacking righties? Are you stacking lefties? Or are you just stacking everybody you can find?
Sorry, can you still hear me, Doc? Because it looks like my pods died on my.
I hear you.
Okay. So, yeah, the way to go here with the Brewers could be interesting. This is a lineup that I have right now that I've put together. I have Perkins, who's really cheap in the outfield. I have Churio, who's only 3,800, and it can be super dynamic any given night. And I have a guy like Willie Adames, who's moderately priced at 4,300 at the shortstop position. So that's a 3-man Brewer stack, and I have a 5-man Seattle stack with Garver, with France, Polanco, Clase, who's only 2,900 in Coors. That's a crazy good buy if that game plays. And Rojas at third base is only 3,800, also fairly cheap in Coors. So there's some interesting values with Seattle, but I would also, of course, be interested in a guy potentially like Hoskins, who could always hit a home run. And how could you not be interested in William Contreras? Despite him being super expensive, the dude just rakes.
So you're going to stack this entire game is what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. I just don't have any faith in Kyle Gibson.
Well, so look, I did a thing here on an optimizer, and it is definitely saying the Seattle stack with Polanco, France, Crawford, and your boy Clase. How do you feel about that as a cheap stack?
I like it. The problem with Crawford for me is there's just not a lot of power there. And although he is going to Coors, taking players in stacks, obviously, a guy could go 4 for 4 with 3 singles and a stolen base or something. But when you're taking the guys in stacks, I always want guys who could hit that home run, because home runs are king, like strikeouts are king.
All right, so give me the pitcher that you're going to start tonight.
I love Freddie Peralta and Joe Ryan, and it's doable so let me tell you this lineup I built for our show, and then, of course, you and I can build one. But I have Joe Ryan and Freddie Peralta as my pitchers, and I told you I have Garver at catcher, Ty France, Jorge Polanco, Josh Rojas, Willie Adames, Churio, Clase, Perkins. So 5-man Mariners, 3-man Brewers. It fit perfectly. Now, I will say it's possible that Luke Raley gets the start over Ty France tonight. Raley's even cheaper than France. So either one of those guys is going to be playing first base and should be included in a stack. And I feel like you're getting really good prices on most of the Mariners because their offense hasn't been very good this year. But anytime you see these guys this cheap in Coors, it's a good buy. The only guys who are priced properly for Coors tonight are probably Haniger and Julio Rodriguez.
All right, but what about, let's say this game doesn't happen. Let's say this game doesn't go. What are you doing?
I'm definitely going Brewers, 100%. And I would probably try to take a look at the Yankees, honestly, because everyone thinks of the Rays as a good pitching team. Right now, the Rays are 28th in Major League Baseball in terms of run prevention. They're not doing very well. And
Tyler Alexander's crappy against righties, which begs me to put in a Volpe, a Judge, a Stanton, a Gleiber, a Trevino, as well as well. But these guys are going to cost me a fortune.
I mean, Juan Soto is still worth it against anybody, obviously. But a team like the Yankees could be interesting. I also kind of like the Atlanta Braves. Big surprise. Who doesn't like the Braves? Unfortunately, Albies is out, and Albies crushes lefties. But you look, and Andrew Heaney can be super inconsistent. Sometimes he's lights out, and sometimes he's just terrible. So that's another way you could possibly go. And I also don't know how much I trust a guy like Alec Marsh against the Baltimore Orioles. Marsh has been relatively good at times, but the past 2 outings haven't been the greatest. And we know how good this Orioles lineup is. So there's definitely other ways to go in terms of stacks.
Do you play DraftKings or FanDuel? And the reason I'm asking is this. I find DK is harder to put a lineup in because the numbers are so, 6,100 for Soto. There's some mind-boggling numbers that it almost forces me to have a couple of crappy pitchers or take a chance on a Raley or a Clase because I need 1 or 2 cheap hitters to get anybody else on my lineup where I don't feel like I have to do that much on FanDuel. I feel like FanDuel is allowing me not a star-studded lineup, but it's a better lineup.
I do think there are times where FanDuel offers better pricing based on different slates. I definitely think that. And baseball might be the only sport where I would look to play on both, whereas everything else I usually just play on DraftKings. And our good buddy Trevor Hillstrom made a really good point of that in an article he wrote preseason about different DFS strategies and looking at both sites every day to compare the prices. I think it's a really good move to do something like that. Typically, I am more DraftKings, but of course, FanDuel only having to pick one pitcher and only having to pick catcher / first baseman makes things a lot more interesting because sometimes catcher is really, really disgusting on DraftKings.
Right. Not only disgusting, but a waste of my money. And then I figure, well, do I pay up for a guy or do I just get a guy for like 3,200 and hope he gets a hit and I get 5 points? So it's funny. I like DraftKings more in football, I think, because I like PPR, right, as opposed to the half point. So I like it, I think, more in NBA because I like the double-double and the triple-doubles. I like those points total here. But in baseball, I feel like I do better on FanDuel because it's hard enough to pick one pitcher, Lou. The problem with FanDuel is if you don't have the guy that throws for 68 points and you get the guy that throws for 38, you've got a 30-point discrepancy, and it's hard to make up those points.
That's very true. By the way, going through some of these things, I'm not sure I would stack Yankees. Not that I don't want to, but they are expensive. But if you want a cheap catcher, you mentioned Trevino. He's only 2,800 tonight. So maybe you go with, a 4-3 and then a one-off in a cheap guy like Trevino, who had some big hits over the earlier in the week against the Blue Jays.
I'm just throwing this one out. I like the Yankees deeper stack, like a Gleiber, Trevino, Oswaldo Cabrera, Volpe. So maybe like the 6-8-9-1 stack, Lou, where I can go and get something else. I mean, that would be my cheaper stack. Maybe that works for me.
Yeah, Volpe's not that cheap, but the rest of them are.
I also like the Guardians a lot tonight because I think Joe Boyle. The Guardians are annoying because they're pesky. They don't hit a lot of home runs, but they put the bat on the ball. And Boyle is one of those guys who can blow up in the worst way possible. I mean, he could throw 6 innings of 1 hit and 10 strikeouts, or he can throw 1 inning of 6 hits and 6 earned runs, which would be a beautiful thing.
It's very true, but believe it or not, the Guardians are not that cheap these days.
They're not cheap at all.
Ramirez is 5,900 usual, but Stephen Kwan is 5,100.
I know.
Naylor's 4,900. Jimenez 4,800. Bo Naylor even 3,900. That is a lot of money to spend on Guardians.
I totally agree with that, which is why I was looking at that before thinking, a Guardian stock makes sense. I couldn't afford it. So to me, I think when I see numbers like that on offense, because we know the best hitters could still go 1 for 3, right? 1 for 3, 1 for 4. I might as well pay up for 2 good pitchers, go for some cheaper stacks, see if I can get lucky with a Mariners and a Yankee stack or a Brewer stack, and maybe it works that way. Because I got the same chance. Maybe I'm missing the home run, but I still think I can cash if the guys get some hits.
Yeah, and of course, any given day things happen, but you got to feel really comfortable with Joe Ryan and Freddie Peralta, 1-2.
Right.
They're both in good matchups. They're both pitching very well. It's hard to imagine them not at least 2Xing.
I want Lou's lock for tonight. Give me Lou's LOCK.
Lou's lock for tonight. Why don't you give me your lock first and give me about 2 more seconds to decide between 2 different people.
My lock for tonight is going to be in that Yankee game. I think it is. And you know what? I kind of like a little, don't laugh. I think Oswaldo Cabrera has been hitting pretty well. And I think I'm going to find a spot for him, either third base or the outfield. And I think the Yankees are going to knock Tyler Alexander around. So I think Oswaldo Cabrera and that deep Yankee stack is going to be my lock of the night.
All right. Assuming that the game does play, one of my locks is going to be Mitch Garver. I just absolutely love this dude. And yeah, he's a little expensive, but it's cool. So that's one of them. The other for me is going to be Willy Adames. I'm a big Willy Adames fan. I have a lot of him in my leagues. He's in a contract year. He's having a good season, batting .308, 3 homers, 10 RBI so far. And I really just have no faith in Kyle Gibson. So Willy Adames is a lock for me, and Mitch Garver is a lock for me.
All right, there we have it. Didn't we hit some of these locks a couple of weeks ago? Didn't we nail some guys that night? Can't remember who it was, but it was a successful night.
Yeah, you called
Teoscar.
And JD Davis, I think.
Right. They both had big nights that night, right?
Yeah.
So you got to listen to the Caught Looking podcast. Come on. All right. You can listen to me on SiriusXM Saturdays and Sundays from 9 to 11 a.m. Eastern. And, of course, Lou will be joining me Sunday at 10:30 a.m. going over the weekly FAAB and the DFS plays for Sunday. All right.
I'll be sure my AirPods are fully charged for that one.
Not partially charged. We heard you perfectly. Every word I heard. It was melodious. All right.
Beautiful.
All right. For Lou Landers, this is Dr. Roto. Please check out drroto.com. We are putting out the best information every day, whether it's sports betting. You know, Lou and Trevor Hillstrom are putting out their prop bets every night. We've got our DFS plays. And, of course, next week, Lou, the NFL draft it's like the clock turns over and the next year starts. I'm getting excited for that too.
Yeah, it's going to be great. We're going to have so much football content coming out, and people sometimes wait till late June, early July. Get ahead of the competition. Come to drroto.com. Get all the football stuff now. By the time June or July comes and you get into it even more, you'll be way ahead of the competition.
You might need a reliever for me, Lou, once football season happens. I don't know. It's like my brain can't handle both things at the same time, but we'll have to see. All right, to everybody out there, be well and take care.
Thanks for stopping by the office. Get your fantasy prescription by subscribing to the channel and checking out drroto.com. And until the next visit, be well and take care.